Watching Minneapolis outdo Baltimore for most insane response to your city burning down has been great fun. Never forget the Baltimore mayor giving the rioters space to destroy.
We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
And now, not to be outdone, the Minneapolis City Council president says, hey, if they're destroying you, don't bother calling the cops. That's just your privilege showing.
What if, in the middle of the night, my home is broken into? Who do I call?
I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege. For those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality.
This, of course, part of Council President Lisa Bender's new commitment to defund and dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department altogether, an announcement she made through CNN on Sunday afternoon. Her best excuse may be that she's on a bender. She's just tossing out ideas like a drunk down at the end of the bar. It's mostly a fool's errand to try to understand the babbling, but it's still fun nonetheless. And despite CNN's best effort to hold her hair while she barfs out all this nonsense,
we're so happy to have you clarify this.
All right, let's get the messaging clear here.
She was never able to explain clearly what this defund and dismantle plan actually looks like. Ilhan Omar says just destroy the police department outright, and like magic, something new will grow in its place.
The Minneapolis Police Department is rotten. And so when we dismantle it, we get rid of that cancer and we allow for something beautiful to rise. And that reimagining allows us to figure out what public safety looks like for us.
And Lisa Bender borrowed similar language. If you destroy the police department, what comes next? I don't know. That's up to only the limits of your imagination.
Work with our community over the next year to imagine what that looks like.
A community process to help reimagine public safety, reimagine what public safety looks like. A lot of us were asked if we could imagine a future without police, and I answered yes to that question.
Okay, well, good luck with replacing your police with John Lennon lyrics, but I don't share your optimism. Even if the current system is imperfect, there is an infinite list of approaches with worse outcomes, and chances are making it up as you go along is almost certainly one such entry. I listened to all 4 interviews this woman did on CNN in just over a 24-hour period between Sunday and Monday. And there's no real point in breaking down her vision for what replaces the Minneapolis Police Department. There isn't one. It's just generally take money that was budgeted for police and redirect it elsewhere.
We've already started to shift those responses away from an armed police officer to these other community resources. And that's what I think about when I imagine where we're going forward in Minneapolis.
The plan is not replace the police with a specific alternative. The plan is replace the police with feelings. So as I was watching, I stopped caring what defund and dismantle actually means because it means nothing. And I became more interested in the question of why. What are the premises that form the reason to make this move, aside from the obvious knee-jerk and tear-jerk response to George Floyd? These are the more subtle details of these interviews, a layer below the viral clips, but they're very important. When you listen to them and you vet them, it's clear these aren't just pie-in-the-sky ideas. These are pie-in-the-sky ideas built upon a foundation of lies. As I was listening, the premises Bender was using just didn't make sense. She was saying simultaneously that the police in Minneapolis don't keep people safe.
Our police department is not keeping every member of our community safe.
Right now, our police department is not making our community feel safe.
And that people in Minneapolis are calling 911 for reasons that don't require police.
We did a big analysis of 911. Why are people in Minneapolis calling for help and what do they need? And we found that people need mental health services. They need health services, EMT, and fire.
Well, if you don't need the cops and you don't call the cops anyway, then why would people feel unsafe? There's no danger in that scenario. You live in an apparent utopia world where the police are all but unnecessary anyway. But the trouble is, there is, of course, danger in this scenario, because everything she just described is totally made up. I don't have polling data on whether Minneapolitans feel unsafe or not, but they have good reason to, and it's not because of the police force. According to recent FBI crime data, Minneapolis ranks 16th in American cities by violent crime rate, ahead of many cities that may surprise you. Chicago, Philadelphia, DC, LA. Minneapolis is worse than all of them. break down the stats by specific crimes, and Minneapolis is particularly bad for rape and robbery, ranked 4th and 9th among major cities in the country, respectively. If you have violent crime at this level, it just doesn't make sense that nobody's calling 911 for the cops, as she claims. I don't care how much you distrust the police. You probably distrust a rapist or a robber more, and I bet you're picking up the phone in such a scenario. So I'm curious where she got this idea. So I found the 911 study she's referencing, and her use of it to claim people are calling 911 for things other than cops, I can't characterize as anything other than a lie. There is no way to reach that interpretation from the data. The dataset includes all the Minneapolis 911 calls from July 2017 to July 2019, the reason for the call, the response time, some additional information. And those calls were not for things like health emergency or fire, as she describes, at least not predominantly. Mental health issues like an emotionally disturbed person or attempted suicide, or health issues like a request for EMS help or accidental injury or drug overdose, even just generic welfare checks as well as fire, these all account for under 10% of the Minneapolis 911 calls combined. And if you look at the most frequent reasons for calling 911 in the data, it's nearly all reasons that require police. Domestic abuse, business alarms, assault, residential alarms, fights, theft, shots fired, damage to property, the list goes on. And not only do the data show that violence is behind the most frequent reasons to call 911 in Minneapolis, but they also show that if Minneapolitans have any reason to be mad at the police, it's not because the police are kneeling on people's necks when they arrive. It's because oftentimes the police aren't arriving at all. According to MinPost's analysis, more than 20,000 911 calls lingered in the police department dispatch system with no officers available to respond, and many of these calls were priority 1 emergencies, high priority calls. In fact, this analysis finds that 9% of those highest priority calls didn't get a response inside of the police department's time guidelines. So when the city council president says people in Minneapolis don't need the cops and they don't call the cops because they don't want them coming, the data she cites to support those claims actually show the exact opposite. People are calling the cops in high volume, and the cops aren't available to respond. And in that reality, it's strange she says the community is urging her to pursue this defund and dismantle the police plan. She says it's broadly supported.
This isn't the opinion of a few council members. This is a broad swath of our community. Across our city, people are asking us for change.
Well, they are asking for change, and they have been. That is true. But there's no evidence to say they're asking for this change. Her city is violent, and the people's calls to stop that violence are going unanswered. And she wants us to believe that people are begging to weaken the system to answer those calls. If you don't believe her, good, because that's not the reality. All available data say people in Minneapolis are in fact responding the way you'd expect them to. Hey, we have a lot of emergencies and not enough people available to respond to and solve those emergencies. And so actually, we'd like more cops and police resources, not less. Last August, a poll of Minneapolis residents found 63% of respondents in favor of adding additional patrol officers in the city. Quote, a large and deep majority support expanding the police force in Minneapolis. Only 28% opposed. And yes, the poll was demographically representative. It wasn't a poll of the Klansmen we're told run this city systemically. The respondents were half women, 35% racial minorities, and even among those racial minorities, 2/3 supported an increased police presence. And that public will and the crime reality on the streets is exactly why the police chief asked for such an increase last year. But this made-up delusion of a fantasy world where more funding for rainbows and unicorns will stop the crime is why the mayor and the city council rejected his efforts. And council president Lisa Bender asked at the time, how could the city and its residents afford such a plan? Very interesting, because she now says the city can afford to micromanage every aspect of your life.
Every single member of our community have that safety and security that they need. You know, that have that housing, that healthcare, that education, all of it together.
The city just can't afford to protect your right to it, which of course is the only legitimate function of government at all. I can build you a life of utopia, and in this utopia, there's no need to protect that life because there are no threats to it. Okay, lady, that all sounds great, but call me skeptical of anybody who says she can build a better life for me than I can. You can't be trusted even to build a stupid political narrative on this shaky foundation of lies. Build an entire city on it? Grab a lawn chair and a lemonade to watch it crumble. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.